The radio broadcast that caused mass panic, October 30th, 1938. A quiet Sunday evening in America. Families gathered around their radios, the warm glow of tubes humming softly, dinner plates still on tables, children drifting towards sleep. An urgent news bulletin, reports of strange explosions on Mars, objects hurtling through space, then a landing. Metallic cylinders opening, creatures emerging, weapons firing. Within minutes, an entire nation believed it was under attack from another world. This was not a war, not an invasion. It was a play, a radio drama. Yet for many, it felt terrifyingly real. Tonight, we revisit the War of the Worlds, the broadcast that blurred the line between fiction and reality and sent a country into panic. Introduction, the setting. In 1938, America was a nation on edge. The Great Depression had scarred families. Across the Atlantic, Europe was marching toward war. Adolf Hitler had risen to power. News of invasions filled headlines. And in homes across America, the radio was the lifeline. No television, no smartphones, just voices carried on the airwaves. Voices that sounded official, urgent, and real. That night, those voices carried something extraordinary. Orson Welles, just 23 years old, led a young theatre group known as the Mercury Theatre. Their task, adapt HG5, Welles' classic novel, The War of the Worlds, for radio. But instead of telling it as a story, they disguised it as live news, interrupting dance music with frantic bulletins, field reporters describing scenes of chaos, government officials issuing warnings. It was theatre, but it sounded like reality. And for thousands of Americans, it was reality. The scenario, what if it was real? Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt this broadcast. You lean forward. Reports of meteors, smoke, craters, strange shapes moving. Then, the unimaginable. Heat rays, cities ablaze, people fleeing, military forces overwhelmed. In the span of 30 minutes, the nation believed the unthinkable. Earth was under attack. Phones rang off the hook. Churches filled with worshippers praying for salvation. Highways jammed as families fled in terror. All from the power of words, sound effects, and the human imagination. But what if this hadn't been fiction? What if, on that October night, Earth really had been invaded? What would have happened, step by step? The story describes invaders with technology far beyond our own. Heat rays, poisonous gas, machines towering over buildings, humanity helpless. If such a force arrived in 1938, America would have had little chance. No satellites, no space program, no coordinated global defenses. The US military still used biplanes. Radios themselves were a relatively new form of mass communication. In the novel, the Martians spread panic by sheer presence. But in 1938, panic was spread not by aliens, but by sound. The radio turned imagination into perceived truth. It showed how vulnerable we are, not just to force, but to information. The truth is, the actual scale of the panic has long been debated. Some historians argue it was exaggerated by newspapers, angry that radio was stealing their audience. Still, evidence shows real fear existed. Police stations were overwhelmed by calls. Newspapers captured stories of families fleeing their homes. Eyewitnesses recalled seeing neighbors pack their cars, convinced that death was imminent. It was a moment that revealed something crucial. When fear meets uncertainty, imagination fills the gaps. And the radio, a trusted source of news, gave those imaginations wings. But let us walk through the night. Step 1. The broadcast begins. At 8:00 p.m., music plays. Then, without warning, the first interruption. A professor explains strange activity on Mars. Listeners lean closer. Step 2. The landing. Minutes later, The broadcast shifts to New Jersey. A field reporter describes the crash of a meteor. Crowds gather. Then the cylinder opens. A heat ray erupts. Screams. Static. Silence. Step 3. Escalation. More bulletins. The army mobilizes. Tanks roll, but nothing works. The invaders advance. The tone is urgent, unrelenting. Step 4. National fear. Listeners believe cities are burning, that New York is falling, that Washington may be next. Radios are turned up loud. Word spreads quickly. Step 5. Panic. Families abandon homes. Congregation kneel in prayer. Some believe the end of the world has come. All of it before Orson Welles calmly broke character, ending the show with reassurance. You will be relieved, I assure you, to learn that we didn't mean it. But for many, the damage was done. The War of the Worlds broadcast revealed more than fear. It revealed power, the power of media to move people, to shape reality, to create panic or unity. In the years that followed, governments took note. During World War II, propaganda flooded the airwaves. Later, television and then the internet would amplify this force. What happened that night was not just a Halloween story, it was a warning. A warning of how fragile the boundary is between truth and illusion. How easily belief can be swayed by authority, urgency, and fear. A young director, a cast of actors, and a single broadcast changed the way we see media forever. There were no aliens, no tripods, no death rays, but there was something far more dangerous, the realization that words alone can bend reality. So the question remains, if a single radio broadcast could shake a nation in 1938, what could happen today in a world connected by billions of screens, where truth and fiction travel at the same speed? That is a question for another night. This was the War of the Worlds.